Welcome, y'all. Welcome to another episode, a special episode of the Southern Comfort Podcast. I'm your boy, Big Rich.
Kevin Harris.
And we're going to hop right into it. Usually we banter, on pointless gibberish for like 10, 15 minutes just to filler.
Yep.
But we can't do that now because we have a special guest.
That's right. We got to act right. We got to behave.
So the count is like a ping pong game. It goes, I talk, camera on me. Kevin talks, cameras on him. But now we have a special guest, and we're going to go ahead and allow her to introduce herself.
Tamia Booker.
Booker, right? And
the Tamia Booker.
The Tamia Booker. T Booker Strategies.
T Booker Strategies.
Live and in flesh. And once again, this podcast is about us being operatives. Tamia is an operative, check. Us being black. Tamia's black, check.
Check.
Us all attending a historically black college. I went to Morehouse.
Check.
Howard University.
Tamia, you went to
FAMU. Check. You knew it was happening. You knew it was happening.
So Kevin.
Don't you put this on me?
No, I'm gonna put it on you.
I would have known.
What the hell is that?
What's the his? Because we were talking about, I said, we're making the point that like HBCUs are, we kid and joke amongst each other, but it's really like a sibling relationship.
Yes.
It's like we talk trash and junk to each other, but it's us against everybody in the real world. And so we fight and advocate for each other, right? And I said I did say maybe perhaps we have to go back and look at the tape. I said the hissing scares me though. I don't get that. That's a FAMU thing.
Like,
but okay.
And I rarely hear it, but when I hear it, I'm just like, what?
Y'all got it out now.
Oh boy.
Can you do the movement for the people and like?
Like, I literally don't understand. So our mascot is a rattlesnake. A snake hisses. We hiss. And when a whole stadium is doing it, it sounds amazing. But it's also our way of saying hi to each other. I get the most drama about this from people who went to Howard. They're like, what is that?
Oh my God.
I'm like, I don't understand. I don't give y'all any junk about, bison stance or whatever. I don't say anything.
That's normal.
That's what we do. Or sometimes we don't hiss and these are the fangs of the snake. Can't believe I have to explain this. Y'all have known me too long. I can't with him. He's on timeout.
Listen, I did.
I'm outnumbered. I knew this was going to happen.
No, okay, but still. Talk about FAMU.
Yeah.
Tell us
when
about
I was
FAMU.
there or today?
No, when you were there.
Please, thank you. So when I was there, it was right after Bush had won from the 2000 elections. So it was, and Jeb Bush was also governor. So it was pretty intense politically. It was actually why I got into politics, mainly because, as you know, being a public HBCU, we're subjected to the states when it comes to funding, right? So when Florida, for the first time, really has had this string of Republican governors, but for a while it had a lot of Democratic governors. So we were constantly protesting for every reason you could think of. And I was like, this is just, I grew up in an area that was pretty conservative, but it was frustrating because you have this hotbed of like young, black, aspiring students. And then we keep being flat-footed by this governor who doesn't believe HBCUs should be, in existence and exactly funded. And now, that was a cakewalk in comparison to what we're dealing with today. And so that's actually what got me involved in politics. I joined the college Dems, I think, beginning of my sophomore year, and started getting involved, and then volunteered on governor's races, and really was kind of like known on campus as kind of the political person. They had a nickname for me that I don't want to say. It was funny. It was cute. But they were like, oh, here she comes. We better get ready to register to vote. I got my card. I'm like, you got your card? Am I playing with y'all? Because the biggest thing was, like, you had a big part of the campus who was extremely active and engaged.
Yeah.
And then you had another part of students who were apathetic and frustrated, especially after what happened. Yeah. And, the one thing that is not really talked about is how, we know about the butterfly ballots in South Florida and all that, but we never talked about the discrimination and suppression that happened on FAM's campus. We had a polling place, and students were turned away then too for all kinds of reasons. Republicans came on campus and be like, oh, you can't vote, and they would turn people away. And that never made national news. I found that out as a freshman coming down there, and people were still upset about it. So it was an interesting time politically there, and I think that really started the like political activism there in a way that we hadn't seen in a while.
Now, were you always interested in politics?
Yes, but not to the extent of what I'm doing right now.
Right.
I always thought that like politics would be something I'd be interested in. I'd be like a civil rights lawyer, and so I would work with like elected officials on civil rights legislation and advocacy. I didn't think that I would go on the other side and be an operative on the campaign side.
So, growing up, what did you want to be?
Growing up,
growing up where? Tell the people where you from.
Oh, pigtail.
Tell them where you from.
I know, I forgot my hat. It's in the other room.
No, you didn't.
You should have reminded me to bring my hat.
That's not up to me.
I'm from Montgomery County, which is outside of Philadelphia. I am a huge Eagles fan, as you both know. And where I grew up, though, it was a small town. We were in this huge community, predominantly white, and there was probably a couple hundred homes, and there was only 2 black homes. We were the second black family to move into this neighborhood.
And did y'all even talk to the other black family?
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's good. Because, you know, we don't always do that.
We don't always do that, but we did there. So, and I was the only black girl in my grade until maybe... This one girl, she came in 2nd grade. She left. I remember because I was traumatized. And then not again until 6th grade.
And she was not of the other black family?
No, she was in a different neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
But our neighborhood, it was just the Bookers and the Dixons. So, and the Dixons are still there. Sweet enough. So race was always prevalent for me because it was every day I was reminded that I was the little black girl in the sea of white people. And I think there was a point, actually, so I wanted to be a doctor. Usually don't tell people that. And then I was like, I don't think I want to do biology forever. I don't like this. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to be a lawyer. That's what I think I'm going to do. And part of it was because I had my family in the city, and then I would see things that confused me, right? And then I come home, and there's all these resources and things that were better. And I remember asking my parents, like, why do the schools look like that, or why do the streets look like that? And my parents explaining why we moved to the suburbs and how that was a thing that now in that suburb, it's much more, there's more black people. It's still not enough, but how a lot of people left because the schools were so underfunded as well. So that injustice kind of those injustices stay with me. And I knew that I wanted to do something to change that for our people. I just didn't know what it looked like, but I just knew that's like where I was headed.
So how does a Philly girl go below the Mason-Dixon line to go to school?
And
of all places, Tallahassee.
How'd you pick, right? Like, what was that?
How did I end up there? So I actually thought I was going to either Howard or Spelman, funny enough. And interestingly, when I was at my church, every year there was like a group that went to FAM. And when they came home, they were always so happy, always talking about it. And I was like, I wonder if my parents will actually let me go there. So I visited FAM, and I went like on the best and worst weekend. It was like Alpha Week. It was student government week. It was hot in March. It was like 85 degrees. And everybody was warm. And my dad looked at me and he said, you don't go here. He goes, I'm okay with you going all the way to school, all the way down here, as long as you make sure you stay focused. And he said, but I also really like the warmth of the professors here. He's like, I really like the way the faculty treats you, and they seem, and that had to be the Southern hospitality that we just were not used to up north. And he was like, I'm okay if you go here. We're gonna have to explain it to your mother. Because I like looking back now, I'm pretty sure my mom was like, yeah, let her go see it, but she's going down to Howard down the street. She ain't going all the way down to Florida. But that's how I ended up down there, and I went.
Wow. What other school did you visit?
I visited Howard. I visited. Our church took us to Morgan, Hampton, and I think we looked at Norfolk too. I never went to Spelman, and that was like the one. I don't know why I didn't go, but I think we just did the Virginia stretch, and then that was kind of it. Because most people went to Howard and Hampton in Philly.
That's probably a logical question. I wonder why people don't consider North Carolina A&T, right? Like, it's a very prestigious school, but it just does not come up unless you're local.
Yeah,
a lot of local people don't go there.
Yeah, a lot of local people don't go there. But if you're I guess kind of like in the know, like that it's like this hidden gem, and it's like FAMU for me in the sense of just kind of like that warmth. Like Howard is great and like I loved it, but as a person coming from the South, like it wasn't Southern.
Yeah.
Necessarily, it is not the same, right? But the times where I have been on FAM's campus and I got to go to a homecoming there.
Oh, did you?
Or when I go to homecoming here, or when I went to A&T's homecoming, like it feels Southern. It feels like exactly what your dear dad was describing, and you get that from like the professors at Howard, but it's not Southern in the same way. So like I get it, but like it's a party. I mean, you're gonna get work done, you're gonna get your lesson done and stuff like that. But like it is like family, and I just think that those are such pivotal years where like your brain is just sort of formed, still literally being formed. Yeah. It is a very unique experience that really sets the tone. And a lot of, everything that we've gone on to do, like I still draw back on my experiences at Howard as being like the foundation. And, and even with you, even before FAM, sitting in some of those classrooms, it's like sitting around some of these tables as an operative. Like,
correct.
Just me again here. Right, exactly, right. So
now, were some of your professors, were they FAMU alum?
A few were.
Few were?
Yeah, there were a few I remember specifically that were.
Was it, how was that for Howard? Were many of your professors Howard alum?
A lot of them were Howard alum. A lot of them were actually getting degrees at Howard while they were teaching, right? So like one of my most influential professors, and she helped me sort of, which is one of the questions I want to ask you, she helped me once I knew I wanted to make politics like a career, but what does that look like? What is an operative, right? She was one of the ones that helped me kind of adjust and understand that side of it and what a career could look like doing it. But she was a news anchor because I was a broadcast major. She was a news anchor for like 20, 25 years, started teaching broadcast at Howard. And then Howard was allowing her to get her PhD while she was teaching there so she could get tenure. So she basically got like a free PhD in history. It had nothing to do with what she was teaching, but it didn't matter. I'm going to get to do a doctorate in just something I want to do at Howard. So it was like a mix. They either had gone to Howard or they were students themselves, right, at Howard. And then we had a lot of professors that were from just all over the world that were coming and teaching, certain things. So it was an interesting mix. But she was she used to be deputy chief of staff to Hillary Clinton because she left journalism, got into politics and government. She was an assistant secretary at Labor. And so when I started talking to her, saying like, I don't think I really want to be a journalist. I think I want to sit on the other side. And what does that look like? She's the one who helped me get my internship with Hillary. And then that just kind of set me off on like, oh, I want to do campaigns and politics and be on that side. So when you were saying you didn't necessarily see yourself becoming like what you are today, do you remember that moment and what it was like when you could visualize, okay, oh, there are people who look like me who do this? Like, when did that light bulb go off when you're like, oh, okay, now I know what I can do?
That's a good question. It probably was around the time that they were asking people to work in student government. And people were like, oh, you should consider a leadership role in student work. And I was like, and the way our, cabinet was set up, it was very much, we're very particular about these things. And it pretty much mimicked a lot of what we see today. And like, I don't know, it felt very real and close to what you see in government. And I was like, I wonder if that will happen for me and not go to law school. But it was like, you know how we deal with this all the time when we talk to our mentees. The first thing they say is, I'm a political science major. I want to go to law school. And it's like, you can have a whole career and never go.
You never go.
And but for whatever reason, it's ingrained in us that we need to do that to be able to understand. And I think it was at some point there. And then I had a teacher in government, Ms. Taylor. Everybody who had poli-sci knew Ms. Taylor. And she was one of the ones that I met when I went down with my dad. And she was the one that always pushed me to think more critically or harder about like, okay, well, what about this? Have you thought about doing this instead? You should go volunteer with that campaign. So I really appreciated that too.
Yeah.
So what's the first campaign you ever volunteered for?
It was Bill McBride's gubernatorial race in 2002. He was trying to challenge Jeb Bush. Yeah. Rough.
What was that experience?
You know, it was different. I remember like as a volunteer, the visual stuff, you know, the visibility, not knowing any of the official route, like any of the official names for these things, but just being like, okay, and knocking on doors. And I didn't, now looking back, I didn't quite understand what it feels like when you're in a campaign that's struggling versus a campaign that isn't, right? Because you just don't know when you're a volunteer. You're showing up, you're knocking on doors, you helping sign up and recruit volunteers, but you have no idea it's struggling as much. Right. So that was the first campaign I volunteered on as like an actual like electoral campaign. I did first do the first campaign I really worked for was restoring the rights of convicted felons in Florida, which was still.
How about to say that's still going.
And it was supposed to have happened last time, and it still has not passed. And so my first project was asking students to sign petitions on campus, and that was my first like issue-based campaign. And
was that the first paid gig? Or?
No, but I just did it as a volunteer.
First paid gig.
First paid gig was on Kerry's campaign.
Wow.
In 2004.
Wow.
And what did you do for Kerry?
I was a student organizer, so I was in charge of getting FAMU out to vote. It was fun. I got to knock on doors in the dorms, get people to vote. And Kerry didn't come down, but Edwards did. And we had this huge
he was the man back then.
He was. Oh, my God. We had this huge rally in front of our Eternal Flame. It was amazing. It was my first time, like, learning advance and understanding how all that stuff works. It was that might have been the moment that I knew that I was going to go into politics. But it was just amazing because you also had this sea of Black youth excited about a campaign. It was everything I had been hoping for. And that was my senior year. So it was everything I'd been working for FAM. So that was my first paid opportunity.
Now, looking back at your role as student organizer for John Kerry, did you think that it would turn into this, right? Like, no clue. Not
like this at all. I remember when, like, the Florida State Director came in and everybody was straightened up. And I remember when the political director was around. It's just so crazy now, like, looking back. And I thought all of it was so amazing, but I just didn't even know. I think at the time I just, like, didn't know how you got there. But I do remember the one thing I did appreciate about the political director is there was, we had a meeting about engagement, and they were like, everyone was going around the room talking about stuff. It was a political meeting. And they were like, okay, Tamia, your turn. And I was like, what? Y'all want me to talk? I'm like 20, 21, huh? You want me to give ideas? And they were serious, and they would write stuff down, and I was just like, oh, okay. And then I was like, And now a lot of the people that I met down there are many people that you know that work in Florida politics to this day. And we were all students and interns just trying to figure it out. And they also gave us a chance too, which I did appreciate.
Did you ever hold a elected position on campus, like SGA or?
I was going to run for not SGA, class president, and then I backed out. I don't know why I did, but I never did.
You can still run for president of the whole university.
You know what? Now look. Now look.
Talk about that right now. Let's go ahead and get it out the way.
You see, I was like, are we talking about today? Or are we talking about?
Talk about the controversy around you guys selecting.
No, they did not.
You guys.
No, you guys.
They know you guys. So we had a situation where our most recent president had to step down, which was very unfortunate because Dr. Robinson, it just felt like he had gotten us back into a very good groove. Now we have this board of trustees that, again, being a public school in a state with DeSantis as governor, it's just a whole different world than it was Jeb Bush. So there are a lot more conservatives on our board, and the governor does get to appoint trustees to our board.
Right.
Yep.
And so what ended up happening was, long story short, we had contenders that were great, and then they threw her in at the last minute. It feels so familiar to politics as we know it, right? And we were short a vote because I forget what happened to the one guy. Either he stepped down or something, and then they quietly rushed in this new guy to vote. That would be like her guy, who then he was the tipped vote for her. So there was no tiebreaker process or anything that we thought might have happened. And instead, they voted her in. Mind you, she had no higher education experience. She was a lobbyist. So, for the three of us.
And not even a lobbyist in like higher ed. She was like a lobbyist in telecommunications. So like no
yes, thank you for
knowledge
saying that.
base or anything with any of these issues. None.
So you put someone in not qualified, no ties or any affiliation to the university whatsoever. But the ties and affiliation that you like to tout to us is that you're close to DeSantis. As if that's going to make anybody at the school.
Because he's on the way out.
Right. Like it's going to be whatever. And you think that we're happy about it. So it's just been, and then she demanded the highest salary that we've ever paid any president at the school. I think they're still discussing that, and there's stuff now. People are like, it's not too late. And we're like, it is too late. So of course the alumni were all hurt, and the students, that we feel bad for them too, because we already know right now our schools are under attack. And then you put somebody there who is not a friend. Not like, you can't even say ally, just not even a friend to HBCUs, doesn't understand the experience, definitely doesn't understand what it's like to be an HBCU in the Deep South and to deal with what we've dealt with over the years. So it's just a land of uncertainty and discomfort, and we're pretty much all upset.
And that's how they play, because we did a campaign, the state attorney campaign for Monique Worrell in Orlando, and Monique was a black or is a black female state attorney. She's only the second black woman to be a elected state attorney in Florida, and DeSantis removed her from office because down there in Florida, the governor can remove an elected official. So he removed her from office and installed, just like here, a black puppet, and I'll just say it, a black puppet, to kind of hold the seat and do it. And then we had to run Monique's race again and help her win her seat back. But like, this is what they do. This is what they do. So so I think that's tough, and I think it was just like one of those like galvanizing moments too, where you did kind of see that we're all like a family, because we were like pissed like for y'all and concerned. I mean, because what is this, right? What is this? And because it's a state-funded school, it's so important to have the politics, right, be right, and have somebody in that role that can actually operate and understands the issues, but most importantly is have values that are aligned with preserving the institution, right? Those are not her values. And so it to me, again, it's like another example of just trying to just erase our history.
So is there a plan to organize around making her life miserable?
There was a town hall to discuss, like, what the pushback looks like.
Throwing the paper in her front lawn.
I do think it's going to be very rough for her, because when I was there and they appointed President Gaines, I think that was my sophomore year. He was, back then it was like kind of on the hush, but it was like, he's a conservative, he's aligned with Jeb Bush, and we were always in his office, and that was mild in comparison to where we are now. And I don't think it's going to be, he didn't last but maybe 2 years, because once Dr. Humphreys left, that's when our up and down started. And I don't see her having anywhere near. So I know that they've been organizing. We had a campaign event, which is why I missed it. But there are continuous conversations. I had to step back from it because I was watching it and I was all in, and I watched the vote happen, and I was upset. So I had to take a self-care step back. But I'm sure it'll pick back up again when they go back to school in the fall or in the summer, rather.
Well, hopefully so. So you graduate from FAMU.
Yes, sir.
Where does the road take you?
It takes me to D.C., straight to D.C. I went to the Center for American Progress. It had just started.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
Didn't even know what it was. And one of my mentors, in Tallahassee was like, you should go. There's a lot of people there that you could have that will have your back. A lot of them work for the Clintons, and you can learn a lot about policy and organizing. I think you should move. And I was like, oh, I thought I was just going to be in Florida.
Really? You want to stay in Florida?
I mean, I went back and forth about it every day.
You want to stay in Tallahassee?
I was okay with it because I was working in politics. Because after the Kerry campaign, they offered me a job at the Democratic Party. So I had a job.
Okay.
You know how it is, like you're 22, you got a job, and you're working in politics. So I was okay with it. I wanted more money, though, I remember.
Let's back up. Let's go from a northerner to that transition to a place like Tallahassee, which I don't think people are aware. On the map, it sits right below the Georgia borderline. So it's not really Florida as much as it is South Georgia.
We call it South Georgia.
In rural.
And like, because once you get out of Leon County,
Georgia.
whoa.
I have, my brother-in-law is from Tallahassee.
Oh, really?
And they have a nice acreage of land down there. And they have watermelons that grow on the property. So just to give you a sense, right, like
Rural.
for a watermelon to succeed and be sweet and delicious, it needs one thing, and that is direct sunlight. And that is Tallahassee, direct sunlight. What was that like?
It was a rough transition, I'm not going to lie. I hated it. I told my parents I wanted to come home.
How many times?
Oh my gosh. My dad was just talking about this. He's like, I told her, I want you to just try to tough it out the rest of the semester. Because when I was first there, I was so excited. Everybody was black.
Yeah.
You know? And I was just like, wow, I'm in a space where everyone around me is black. And I just never had that. Other than church on Sunday, I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I know you from Atlanta and Birmingham, whole different world in Montgomeryville.
Right.
Next time y'all come to Philly, I'm going to have y'all come all the way up and you'll see.
Come out to the county.
Come out to the suburbs. Because it's also Swing County, so it'd be good for you to see it.
The next time y'all up to Philly.
You know what?
I love Philly.
No, thank you, Kevin. That's why I
Actually,
turned right to you.
It's one of my favorite cities to go to concerts at.
It is a good
and I still got to make it to an Eagles game. And I have gone to a 76ers game.
Oh,
and it's one of the most like vibrant stadium. I mean, they had dudes just in there playing the drums. Like every exit, there's something else going on.
Always something.
But it's like you don't even need to go in and watch the game. I could just walk around the outside of here and just watch stuff.
Really
but yeah, no, Philly is a fun city. And when we were looking to move out of DC, you know, Philly was on my list. It's definitely a place that I would have moved to. But my wife, she just didn't want to deal with seasons anymore.
Oh, yeah, she would definitely have that.
Yeah, so Florida.
And see, I missed that.
Yeah.
I missed seasons. I was like, I'm still wearing summertime clothes. Oh my goodness. It was like fall, which was 1 week, it was 50 degrees and everyone was wearing like bubble coats. I was like, y'all, you're going to sweat. They're like, no, we're not. I'm like, you will. That's too hot. Like, you need something a little lighter. Yeah. But yeah, I did. I hated it.
How long did it take? For you just like,
you have me like literally remembering. So I think by the time I went home for Thanksgiving, I was like, I love it, but I hate it. And they were like, I love the school, but I was like, it's the South is slow, and it's just different, and people, everyone says I talk differently, and you know, I was already dealing with that in Philly because I don't have a Philly accent.
And you brought your ass down south.
Down south.
Hillary Banks.
No, don't say that. It's so funny. The other day I was like, somebody tried to call me that. I hated it. I was just like, I can't make it. I'm not going to make it. And they were like, you'll be fine. You need to find something that you like and you will adjust eventually.
And what was that something?
It was politics.
Politics.
Wow.
It really was.
Yeah.
Not the cuisine?
That used to frustrate me too. I'm like, I can't find a deli. There's no delis. No one. When I would be like, I want a hoagie, they're like, what? Look at y'all. See? What? I'm like,
sandwich.
Now y'all got Wawa all over Florida. You wait till now. Apparently, just now there are more Wawas in Florida than there are in the state of Pennsylvania.
We just got our first Wawa.
There's one here?
It's not here. So it's coastal Georgia. It's not
Oh, okay.
But you know,
sense.
more people from outside
what they
of Florida
said.
have come into the state. So like the taste have changed. But like, I mean, Cracker Barrel might have something for you.
It was rough.
Fried fish sandwich.
It was rough. Eventually I learned to love it.
Public sub.
Yeah, when I finally learned that public sub actually did hold me over. But there would be days where I'd be like, I'm so confused. Like, I knew I wasn't getting cheesesteak, but can I get a hoagie? Like, y'all don't have them here?
No, the closest you was gonna get is Publix.
It was a Publix sub, which I will eat when I go.
They are delicious.
When I go south.
Yes.
They do a decent job.
Yes.
All right, so now you're Center for American Progress. You are, I'm guessing, organizer, maybe?
Yes, I am.
Right.
I'm organizer.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, what was that like?
It was different because this was around the time that the Iraq War had started.
Mm.
So everything was around the war.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy now thinking about where we are and getting people to be passionate about it. And because when I first went to school, 9/11 happened. That was my freshman year.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was definitely a time where I saw the change because my job was to organize students around the country around particular issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that really ignited students. That and student loan debt and higher education costs. Still here we are.
Still here.
20-something years later and still struggling with it.
Yep.
But it was fun. I did enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
It did feel like I don't want to say a utopia, but it was basically a fresh out of college run division of CAP. It was they now call it Generation Progress. It was Campus Progress when I was there. And I remember debating about changing the name. And they eventually did change it. And we had like a young guy who I still stay in touch with who led us. And so it was definitely like I had a little bit of a taste of what politics was like when I dealt with people outside of our Campus Progress bubble. When you went upstairs, because we were on the first floor, when you went upstairs to the policy shop, it was barely anybody that looked like us. Our department was a rainbow coalition. And then when you went up to policy, there was just a few people of color, and everybody else running that thing was white. So it was probably my first foray into seeing what it would be like to then step into politics.
And I think you brought on something that kind of sparked something in my head. Experiencing racism up north, experiencing racism below the Mason-Dixon line, and then experiencing institutional organization racism.
Yeah.
Like, kind of talk about those differences.
Yes, because the one thing I remember having to tell people at FAMU is they are racist up north too.
Yeah.
Because they would be like, some people would say stuff to me and I'm like, no. So up north, you deal with a world of microaggressions and gaslighting.
That's right.
And that is what I dealt with all of the time. And everything that we talk about with struggling with, someone, bothering you, but then telling on you and you're the problem. That was always what I got. I was always a troublemaker. And it was, my parents were like, my mom was a teacher and was like, she doesn't have issues. Like it's, you all have to figure it out. And it got to the point where Miss Curley, my principal, she would be like, hi, Tamia, you here again? I'm like, yep. I would just get sent down for whatever reason. They would just find something, send her downstairs.
That sounds familiar.
It's just like,
except you did it.
Did you do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was guilty.
Absolutely.
See, and I didn't, and they would be like, Tamia, go downstairs. I didn't do anything. I was like, I know I'm not a bad kid. Like, what is going on?
Right.
My parents have already told me, you stand out, period. You were the only black girl, but that was part of the problem.
Yeah.
So dealing with that. And then in the South, it felt different to me in that, because people always say, in the South, they'll call you, whatever to your face. And I noticed, I could feel the air sometimes in Tallahassee. It's mostly liberal, but, you still have your specs. But then they would say, like, once you step out Leon County, you need to be careful. And, like, people would be like, no, we really mean it.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh okay. Like, we joke about it up north, but then it's like, oh, you really can't just, like, wander off and go venture out.
Yeah. No, I grew up, and it's probably still the same way, but, like, you didn't stop in Coleman County for gas.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Yeah, you don't.
Right.
You don't.
I know that, and I even know that.
You know that from doing Alabama
campaigns
races. Yeah, like, you don't stop there.
They were like, to me, you keep going, you go to Birmingham.
You fill up.
you fill
make
up
sure
and then
you fill up. You don't stop there for gas.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. It's
a
real thing.
It's a real thing. And seeing it and, experiencing it from that perspective, I also saw just how we deal with each other differently too in both the North and the South. And I think I remember telling my parents the thing I don't like the most down here is the colorism. I am having a hard time with it. And I remember having a conversation with them about that when I got home. And I realized a lot of it too, of course, is because of just the way people are treated in the South. And even you add to that color. Up north is, they're like, you're black, so we don't like you, period.
Right.
But there would be different degrees of it. And then to your point about your question about institutional racism, and then you go into these places that are democratic, run mostly by white people, and then there's no representation of us in the rooms where the decisions are being made. And that was hard to see. So I knew by the time I got to DC that I was going to be doing this work. I still didn't quite know I would be here, but I was like, there has to be a way for us, if we're this important, our vote is so important, there has to be a way for us to be able to make these changes and be in the rooms.
Did you pick up or learn anything at FAMU that you kind of used and still use to this day?
I definitely think that I really learned how to talk and engage with voters and potential voters and convince people why they needed to know, right? Like it would be, I understood. I think the thing I noticed too in the South was because our people have been discriminated against for so much, they're disillusioned when it comes to it. And I understood that. And really listening, it really helped shape my perspective of how I grew up in a town where all the black people were affluent, right? So voting was not a question. It was who you're voting for. And I grew up with people who were black Republicans and black Democrats. I grew up with both. But all of them have let me know they are Democratic now. My parents' friends are like, oh, no. We've moved over. We can't. But when I went to the South, it wasn't that same mentality across the board. There were people who did, but when you talk to more people, and I met people of different backgrounds. Yeah. So it really helped me understand that plight in a different way versus just kind of like seeing it and then going to go hang out with family and have fun, but really understanding.
Yeah, and there's a big difference because I know a lot of people who grew up in South Georgia go to FAM because it's really closer to home. So close. And it's in another state. So it's just like, since Albany is only 2 hours away. Right. And so I learned that there was a difference between inner city poor and rural poor.
I learned that at FAM too.
Well, see, no, there's but see, I learned that there's no difference in rural poor. It's rural, and they don't necessarily consider themselves poor because they don't know what the measurement or the mark really is, right?
Yeah.
They you grew up in the projects that's poor. Well, what is poor?
Yeah.
Right? Because in the rural South, it's just a different.
It's different.
It's a different standard, right?
Yes,
and so when you enter the age of 18 and up and you start understanding and learning about socioeconomic status and you realize, and you're from an area like Albany or Tallahassee or Tifton or we're poor, right? Like we're poor. What does that really mean? And then it's just interesting to hear you grew up at this level above the Mason-Dixon line and from Philly. You know, your dad's an attorney, your mom's a teacher, right? You understand the value of an education, as opposed to a lot of those kids. They're just told you go to college,
right?
And they're the first,
right?
Yeah,
in many ways,
they're the first in many ways.
They're trailblazers,
but it's not explained why you're supposed to go to college to get a good job, right?
Yeah,
but don't understand the value of what that education can then push and bring on. So it's just always interesting to see, right, your difference in the racism you experienced at North, as well as what you learned in school up North. Like, when was your first black teacher?
Oh my gosh. It was actually second grade for math. Okay. Only part-time. She was the only one, Mrs. Ridley.
Part-time.
So math, we switched. People would move around based on their math level for math class. That was the only thing we switched for. And then she one day, I'll never forget it, told me she was moving me out of her class, and I cried. And she said she was moving me out because I was ready to go to the higher level math class. And I was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And it was second grade.
And you didn't have another black teacher?
I didn't have another black teacher again.
Until you got to college?
I went to FAM.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is always, what was Black History Month like for you?
Oh. It was actually very frustrating because when you know how they do those memes where they're like, we're talking about someone black, and then everyone turns and looks at the black person in class. That actually happens.
Tamia, is that what happened?
Tamia, can you lead the conversation? Tamia, who do you think we should talk about? And what got me was my mom being a teacher. My mom would be like, you better make sure you say this, because she was very clear with us that we knew that we were black. And we knew our history. And it wasn't just Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, because that's always what they did with us. It was just those two every time. And someone would be like, can we add Michael Jackson? I'll never forget that. And I was like, there's so many other people you could learn about. Garrett Morgan, Marian Anderson.
Wow.
And they never knew. So whenever we had to do a presentation, I would bring in someone different. And they would be looking at me like, who's this?
You were like, Stokely Carmichael.
And you could never talk about Malcolm X.
Nat Turner.
The Nat Turners, the Malcolm X's. It was like, well, he hates white people. I'm like, what? I'm sorry, what was that? What did you do this weekend? I went to see Malcolm X. So yeah, it was rough. It was not. It was I bet my brother and my sister probably feel the same way. By the time my youngest brother was there were more black teachers. But the three of us, it was just like, here we go again. We got to learn the same three people, and no one's gonna learn anything new. And this is every year. Like, I'm going up grades. I should be learning about others.
Right.
Nope. I learned more black history from my mother.
And that's what I love about the HBCU experience too.
Yes.
Just going to school in the South. My school was more, there were more kids of color, more African American teachers there, but the curriculum is the curriculum, right? And so we're taking Alabama history, and we might get to the Montgomery bus boycott like at the very end of class. We've been here a year, and we're just not getting to the Montgomery boycott, but then you go to like Howard, and like one of my favorite classes, it was a whole class that was just focused on Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and who was right. So all we did was study their philosophies, their teachings, their.
Did you?
It's like everything. It was a whole class, and like I loved it. But one thing I did while we had you that I did want to make sure that we asked, because one of the things that like we've been covering here recently is just there's been, basically autopsies done of what went wrong in 2024. And one of the things we know is that we basically lost ground with every group except black women.
Yeah.
And as we, black women basically were just kind of done, right? After this last election. We've now had a little time that has passed. And we already know the Dem coalition is shrinking, and we got a lot of work to do if we start losing black women too. Like, oof, boy. So what is the current mood? Because you're operative, you're in that space, and you're with these black women all the time, right? That are really working on this stuff. So like, what's the mood now?
You're right. At first, everyone was like, I'm not doing anything. We're tired. Like, this is just crazy. And we're out here fighting. We don't get any money. We don't get any support from an operative perspective. Now we are starting to slowly see a shift, because we're recognizing that if we don't do much, we may lose again. Everyone thinks taking back the house is going to be simple, but I actually don't think it is. And so there are more conversations happening now, more convenings, where we're at least talking and meeting with each other to talk about how do we want to organize ourselves and be at the table for these midterms. But I would say it's still moving slowly, because everyone still feels exhausted. And when you're dealing with more of the same, and we're loyal, and you still, only want to relegate us to doing black women engagement, then it's kind of like, well, we could just figure this out on our own. We don't really need to be at some of these tables. So it's mixed. If you asked me this in February, I'd be like, oh, nobody's doing anything. Literally, no one was doing anything. And I'll be at the Collective PAC is having their conference this weekend, so I'll go to that. So that will also give me a really good sense of kind of where we are. But I think they're one of the first groups that actually do this type of political convening for black people who work in the space, because we really haven't had anything right
since then to get together and process.
No.
Well, I think that's going to be a good transition for us into our part 2 episode with you, kind of discuss your life after Center for American Progress, and your life on the Hill. Your life, joining us on the campaign trails.
Few high-ranking Black Senate aides. So yeah.
So we'll get to that. We close out every episode with a Mamba moment, but we're going to reserve that for part 2.
Okay.
Hope you guys can tune in. We really appreciate you, Tamia, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
We appreciate everybody for listening. Please tune in next when we come back. This is Big Rich.
Kevin Harris.
And Tamia Booker. T. Booker Strategies.
Yes. Peace.
Peace.